So in the last section, we went through and looked at Application Express and executed some commands from a SQL statement. So let's kind of review what we've done. We started with the home page. We modified navigation so we could navigate between different interfaces and different pages by going into different menus. From there, we went into submenus and created a secondary set where we could go into other pages and then expose or hide certain parts of the page. So in this example, we went into an unmetered section of storage as a service, typed in the two questions that we got from the calculator that we created, and were able to come back with a SQL calculation by going and selecting the value, returning numbers from that value, and then doing the same to create an order entry sheet. So it gives us the basic parameters along with a button that lets us go in and do what we need to see the numbers. So let's look at the SQL statements, because that's probably the most difficult part to understand of this. The navigation is pretty straightforward. So let's go in and look at the SQL statements. So in the page, we go to the interactive report and we select or the type of page that we're looking at is interactive report, and we type in the SQL query. So let's go through and look specifically at the SQL query that we're looking at. So we're going to do a select statement. We're going to include a string title, and then from there we're going to pull out the price just to show how much per terabyte per month this field is. So what we'll see is storage capacity at $30 per terabyte per month is the description. In the next field, what we're looking at is the monthly charge. So we're taking the price list, price again, exactly the same thing that we're pulling in, but we're pulling in the number value that we put in as the field entry, so the capacity. So we're taking capacity times the price and then putting it into a money format and then displaying that as a monthly value. We then take the exact same thing but multiply it by the number of months that we're requesting and put that in as the annual value, and we're doing that for a specific part number. And this part number is the storage per terabyte per month for unmetered service. If we're going to do a metered service, it'd be something different. If we're going to do database backup as a service, it'd be a different part number. But effectively, it would be the same calculation and the same information so that we could reuse this SQL statement, just use a different part number effectively is what we do. Now, if we look at what we drop into the quote, it's effectively the same thing. It's just formatted a little bit differently. What we're doing is passing in one of the strings that we type in. So that would be the quantity of storage that we're looking for. In this example that we typed in, it was 30 terabytes as the quantity. The price list part number is the item number that we're returning, and that's actually the part number we're searching for. The price as unit is the same as it is in the cost sheet, and the price for total is what we're looking for over a 12-month period. So the select statement's a little bit different, formatted differently with quantity and the part number, because we need that to type into a web quote, so it makes it a whole lot easier. But basically it's the very similar select statement between the two entries. Now, if we're going to look at a metered service, the metered service, let's go look at the Excel spreadsheet to see how the metered service is calculated. Now, notice it's a little bit more complicated, and then we have 5 questions instead of 2. We have an initial storage where we start out at maybe 10 terabytes and grow to 100 terabytes, and we're going to pull back 10% of the data. As in we're going to read and write, but it's 90% write and 10% read back. So notice the price drops in as storage capacity. If we look at the Excel spreadsheet, this is a variable price based on the total amount of storage that's read in and written out, or that's stored. for the outbound transmission, it's the same thing. It's a rate for how much is being transferred. And then for the miscellaneous, this is how many directory lookups, and we just put in a dollar amount for that. And then over here showed the 1% total, just to show how much we're actually looking at, because we don't want to get above a couple percentage for this. And that generates a total price, which is then used down here for the bill of materials. Notice we just take the number that's generated here and round it up to the nearest dollar amount, and then pull in the item from the price list, and the calculation is this number times 1 effectively, which gives us this number. So to do this, it's a little bit more complex, because if you look at this number, it's a table lookup. It's if it's above a certain rate for the monthly average, and we have to go calculate the monthly average, then it's an embedded calculation. So we can do the same thing in our application express over here. It just makes the SQL statement, by doing an interactive report, makes it a little bit more complex in that we have to do a running average, and then we have to do other features that bring in the data for us. But effectively, it's the same structure and the same type of select statement that we have here. I'm not actually going to do that. I wanted to go in and look at the select statement, and we can do it in two ways. We can go in and work on the select statement, where we say we're going to copy the select statement from a notepad that we have saved. So we can copy this select statement and drop it in here, but anytime we have the unmetered storage capacity, we have to actually type a number in here. And then anytime we have the month, we have to type in a number as well. So from here we can run this, it will go out and come back in and show us exactly what it should drop in. If we wanted to make this more complex, rather than saying 30, we'd have to say something like times the average of 10 and 100. And then this number wouldn't be 30, it would be a much smaller number, because when we go calculate, if we have the average comes up with the wrong value here, so we typed it in wrong and need to go debug what it actually means and how it actually calculates. So there are a variety of ways of executing this and making it run a certain way. So just to kind of summarize what we've done, we went in and created a navigation field. The navigation field allows us to jump from page to page. On the other pages, we've gone in and created a similar navigation field that allows us to jump from page to page, and that's the secondary navigation that gets us to the secondary pages. And here are the pages we're getting to. And then within those pages, we go in and look at subsections, and the navigation redirects and sets a value, and the value determines whether I've got metered or unmetered turned on and which regions are being displayed. Inside of the regions, we have some fundamental questions where we're asking information, and then in the cost section, we're using that information that we asked for and passing it in as a variable based on the labels that are in that section. So from that, we can do a form with entries, which allows us to do a simple cost calculator. Now, how do we do what we're doing over here? We have to get a little bit more complex and do table lookups. We have to do conditional tables for things like unmetered database backup, it's relatively simple. It's just a different number that we look up. In this example, it's 33 instead of 30. So it's a very similar calculation. We could go do this fairly quickly. For something like archived, it's a little bit more complex in that we've got a retrieval factor, we've got total retrieval and average monthly retrieval that we have to go calculate, which is generated in this field, which gives us a little bit more complex of calculation. And in this one, we're looking at the total retrieval divided by the period that we're retrieving it over times the cost, and then we divide that by the period that we're dividing it by. So it gives us the total monthly retrieval average times the retrieval cost. So that gives us an estimate of what it should be. So basically what we're trying to do is take what we see in the Excel spreadsheet on all the different tabs, and then from these tabs translate it into select statements that happen in the Application Express code. Hopefully this is a good introduction to Application Express and how to take an Excel spreadsheet and translate it into a database and web front-end interface, which is much, much easier to navigate and deal with in multiple Excel spreadsheets.